Greetings, City Schools students, families, and staff members as well. Thank you for joining us for our Family Town Hall. To everybody on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, we are so happy to have you here. And for our Spanish speaking audience joining us through our partners at ASCI Translations, we're glad to have you with us as well. Again, tonight we do not have our CEO. She sends her greetings, but she's being the CEO, which means she's got a lot of commitments. But in her place, I always say we try to bring you the best, most knowledgeable people. So we have Allison Perkins Cohen, our Chief of Staff. Allison, how are you doing?
I'm great, Andre. Thanks so much for having me here. I love being on your town halls. They are always great fun, and you are a wonderful facilitator, and I love seeing all these families here. So thank you for letting me be part of it.
Thank you, Allison. We're glad to have you as well. If for nothing else, we wouldn't have anybody to answer questions. No. Oh, guys, it's been a long day, but it's been a good day in city schools. Before we get started, we're going to start with some very brief comments tonight from our Chief of Staff, and then we'll begin to take your questions. In addition to Allison Perkins Cohen on camera, we've got numerous experts who are off camera who will appear magically when you ask a question related to their topic. On any of our platforms, if you have questions, please submit them in the comments section. Those questions will make it up to me, and we'll try to answer as many as we can before 6:45 p.m. when we'll be signing off. If you've got questions or just thoughts in general about the reopening process, while we're in this presentation, you can also go to our reopening website, www.baltimorecitysschools.org/reopening. There we have a dashboard full of stakeholder engagement data that you've shared with us so you understand our decision making. But most importantly, we have a draft of our reopening plan that was submitted to the board on July 28th. That we're polishing up to have as a plan as required by law later this month. So before we begin to take your questions, Allison, do you have anything briefly that you'd love to share with the City Schools audience?
Sure, thank you, Andre. So a couple things is one, we've been really happy to see all the families coming out to our three most recent technology distribution times at the central office. So last week we've been doing technology distributions all summer. And in the last few times, we've seen a real uptick in families coming out, which is so great. We're so happy for families and students to come out to get the devices that they need. So we gave out 1,000 devices in each of the last two events. And so now at this point, we've given out 25,000 Chromebooks to students to help them prepare for our virtual start in the fall. It really is a significant increase we saw. So we've been doing these. We started, if people remember, we started with school-based distributions back in the spring, back in April, doing distributions, 2 rounds of distributions at schools. When school ended, we switched to the centralized distribution and have been doing that all summer. We were getting about a little bit less than 200 families each time until just recently we started seeing just a really significant increase in families coming out, which is great. But it means we've paused now in terms of the centralized distribution and are going to move a little bit more quickly than we originally planned back to a school-based distribution model, just because it's hard to serve all those families and meet the safety and health standards during COVID, as well as keep people out of the heat. So for those reasons, we're going to switch back to a distribution at your child's school. You can reach out to your school to let them know if you if you still need a device. We will get back to you by August 17th with more specifics about the timing for that. But please make sure that if you need a device for your child, we also have hotspots for internet access, that you come out and get those, because we really want to make sure that our students have the technology they need to be successful this fall. The other thing is about immunization. So sometimes, immunizations, it's a little bit hard, I think, right now for families to remember that even though we're in a virtual environment, you still need immunizations. And so they're really important to the greater public health of the city, and they're important to your own child's health. And they're important to us for when we, at some point, will be coming back to school. So, and to our enrollment, we need you to have immunizations for enrollment. So please make sure that you have your immunizations up to date. And if you visit our website, there's information about where you can get clinics where you can get up to date immunizations. And so please keep working on that, because that's going to be really important as we get ready for the school year start. So that was it, Andre.
Thank you, Allison, for that synopsis. And again, about the reminder for immunizations. There's a lot going on: computers, meals, when are we going back? That's a very basic item that, again, no matter where we're at in our learning environments, state law on that issue. And let's try to make sure we're all compliant in helping to keep each other safe. And speaking of, Allison, just for our audience again, because there's still folks out there who are wondering, when's the first day of school?
Well, we pushed back the first day of school till the day after Labor Day, so it's September 8th. We're going to be really excited to see students engaging in virtual learning. We did that to make sure that we were really ready to a strong start to school, and to also, it gives us some additional time to provide professional learning to teachers. What we're doing in the school environment, in this virtual environment, is very different than what we've done before. And we did some professional learning for teachers at the end of the school year to give them some of the tools to be effective in this environment. And we have more opportunities to provide that support to our staff. And so this way we get 8 days of professional learning with our staff before the school year starts, to really make sure that we're going to be off to a good start and ready to provide the quality education that your children deserve.
Thank you, Allison. Now, let's get to a few questions from the audience, and let's start with our folks on Facebook. My Mission Evans asks, when will we get all the materials we need at home before the school year begins? So I assume this is related to computers, technology, and that sort of items. When can folks get these items?
So we really want to make sure families get the computers that they need for their students. So again, we'll be doing distributions at your child's school. So if you do not have computers for your children and for each of your school-age children, because I think some people were making do with a computer before, but we want to make sure that each of your children has a computer, because when we're doing learning in a virtual environment, they each need their own device. And so if you need devices for your children, please reach out to your school and let them know that, so they can keep track of that. And by August 17th, we'll be making an announcement with more details about when those school-based distributions will begin. And the schedules will be a little different at each school, so your school will be reaching out to you too. But yes, please come get a Chromebook or a device for your child. And then if you need support with internet, please reach out for that as well. We have hotspots that we can help support you to make sure you have adequate internet for your students' virtual learning.
Thank you, Allison. And let's stay on that topic for just a little bit, because with the device distribution, there is a caveat related to students that attend charter schools. When we're talking about devices, are we talking about all students or just some students? Takira Parker asked, how can Baltimore City Schools help its charter students with devices? And along with you tonight, Allison, we have Michael Radding from our IT department, who's also here to help. So how can we help them?
So I'll let Michael add too if I forgot anything. So for charter schools too, you should reach out to your school to work with them to get a device. We are working with charter schools too to help support to make sure that they can access the devices that are available through the market to be able to make them available to your students. So I would, yes, reach out to your school directly and let them know that you need a device. During the centralized distributions, when we were doing distributions at the central office, that was for traditional school students. Because of the way that we pay for the computers that we were giving out were being paid for out of the portion of grant funds or other funds that is intended for traditional schools. There are other portions of funds that were intended directly for charter schools or specifically for charter schools that they're purchasing their computers out of. But if your child attends a charter school, please reach out to the charter school and connect with them to make sure they know what your need is. And we're actually doing a survey with charter schools right now to find out the need in schools so that we can help support them accessing computers, because it is a little bit hard to find them right now in the market. So we're trying to make sure we help support that.
Thanks, Allison. And to that point, we also have, again, one of those experts I told you guys about. We have Angela Alvarez, our Executive Director of New Initiatives, who also wants to share a little bit about this topic. Again, she's been one of our leaders in making sure that while students that attend non-charter schools have what they need, that we're also taking care of both sides, because in the end, we want all students to succeed. Hi, Angela.
Angela, I think you're on mute.
Yes, I was. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Just to add on what Allison shared, so we've been working on trying to assist charters. So I would say to families to be patient with your schools. We're trying to assess the need and to help them in acquiring devices from vendors. So there's a little bit of a time gap, but we're working on that to make sure all students have what they need. So just be patient with your schools, but let them know if you have a need. As Allison mentioned, we are surveying schools to understand that need and figuring out how we can help them with accessing the vendors that have the supplies that are needed.
Thank you, Angela. And thank you, Allison, as always. I love being able to provide great insight to our families so they understand what's going on. This is not an easy process to navigate, but we're going to do our best to make it so they can do it well. Allison, now I want to take a question from Facebook, from Sophia Luing. She asked, and I'm sorry, Sophia, if I mispronounced your last name, but Sophia asked, are you tracking the outbreaks that have occurred in other school districts that have occurred during the reopening? And if so, what are we doing with that information?
Thanks, Andre. So we are watching very closely what's happening with other school districts when they open, and we're also, really working closely with our team of health advisors that are helping advise us on a safe opening. Part of that is that tracking process and making sure that we're ready for a safe opening is why we're opening virtually first, to make sure that we would have everything we need in place to allow for a safe opening if we do start seeing students in person. But right now, in the beginning, we are starting all virtual for all students. We, as I mentioned, have a group of experts in healthcare, health advisors who are working with us in a variety of ways, advising us on safe standard operating procedures that we can use in schools, as well as in terms of developing a dashboard with us that we can use to inform us as we're making decisions about whether we could open safely for students or not. And so that group includes representatives from the Baltimore City Health Department, from Johns Hopkins, from Morgan State, from University of Maryland Medical Center. And we're looking at a range of metrics that that group has advised us on that they think are the most informative to really help us to make a decision about how to keep our children and staff and families safe. And so that those metrics include the positivity rates in the community, the number of new cases that we're seeing in the community, any hotspots, so particular areas of the city where there's high risk. And then if we were in an environment where we had open for some students, then we would also be tracking student absenteeism as a way of an indicator to see if there is an issue with spread in schools. So we, take this very seriously and would not want to make sure that we have really good, up-to-date information that would inform any decision that we make, so that we could make sure that that your children are safe and that our staff are safe and that we're keeping the community safe.
Thank you, Allison. Now we're going to move to a series of instructional questions before we turn back to a series of device-related questions. Those tend to be the themes of the night on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. We're going to start on Facebook with Selena Williams. What happens to students who have one-on-ones? This sounds kind of like a special education question, Allison. And I believe we have someone here who can talk about one-on-ones, and Dr. Deborah Brooks.
Yeah, I'm going to let Dr. Brooks is here. I just saw her. So yeah, I'm going to let her talk about that because that is her expertise and not mine. So thank you for being here, Deborah.
Not a worries. Good evening, everyone. Deborah Brooks, Executive Director of Special Education, and great question. So those students where it's been identified on their IEPs or 504 plans that they have an additional adult to support them with instruction and or behavior, we will be allowing and having our paraprofessionals be able to support in that area. The paraprofessionals will also have access to devices to be able to provide that additional adult support in the virtual space. And we will be looking at each of those students individually. We also will have, in many circumstances where there is opportunities for co-teaching. So there's more than one adult in that instructional setting where there is a general educator as well as a special educator so that the student can have additional supports that way as well. So we're looking individually at our students to see where that additional support is needed and providing that additional support in the virtual space with our paraeducators as well in a co-teaching model. So that was an excellent question and thank you for asking.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks. We appreciate you. Now we have, again, I'm going to stick with my instructional questions and we'll get back to the device questions. So moving on to the next instructional question from Shay Anderson. Shay asks, what will the school day look like? What will happen with classes that need hands-on learning? Now, in addition to Allison Perkins Cohen, our Chief of Staff, we also have Janice Lane, our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. So our question again is, what will the school day look like? Do we know? And I'm sure we do. That's our question.
You want me to start, Allison?
Yeah, go ahead, Janice.
Great. Hi, everybody. Janice Lane, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. We have been working really hard to think about those hands-on opportunities, especially for math classes, science classes, etc. So we're working with schools to also send home some materials, even for our earliest learners that will support the hands-on work that they do. We're also exploring and utilizing some video aspects so that as students are engaging with things like science experiments, they can see them and virtually engage. So really trying to be creative with the ways to keep the learning going. And then where possible, providing supports and resources and materials to supplement the online learning. We worked with our principals this week to talk about before schools actually start, following social distance rules, health guidelines, etc., that schools will have pickups prior to the start of school, and those pickups will include some of those hands-on materials as well as materials to supplement the work like they're reading textbooks or workbook to support what happens in literacy and math, in science, etc.
Thank you, Janice, and stay right there because your answer prompted another question, this time from Nellie Bay. Nellie asked, will schools or teachers have any flexibility with suggested scheduling?
Absolutely. Great question. There are components that are in the schedule. Those components are what we're expecting all students and teachers to engage in. The flexibility will be the times within the schedule. So if science wants to happen in the morning instead of the afternoon, or if a teacher wants their office hours to be later in the day because they work with older students and students are available, there's flexibility with the school and with school leadership around those pieces. But the components are the pieces where there is no flexibility. We want to make sure that all students have equity in their instruction, but also have a balanced approach so that when we're thinking about things like the arts and PE and social studies, science, ELA, and math, we want to make sure all students have equal dosages of that work across grade levels. So again, the components are not flexible, but the timing and where you set those up in the day are flexible.
Thank you, Janice. I appreciate you. And now we're going to pass the ball back to Allison as we begin to talk about devices. Allison, the first question that we have on the table is, what devices are recommended for students?
So I am definitely going to turn this over to Michael in a second here because he is much more of the tech person than I am. But what we have been distributing has been Chromebooks, and Michael can give you much more information than I can about the specifications of a Chromebook and why that is the device that we've been utilizing.
Sure. So just to introduce myself, Michael Radding, I'm the Director of Technical Support Services in IT. As Allison referenced, we are distributing Chromebooks to students for two main reasons. So one just being, as a district, we've standardized on Google Classroom, and Chromebooks interface very well connecting to Google Classroom. And then most of our content, we're delivering content through online platforms. And again, Chromebooks just make it really seamless to connect to those platforms. But for students and families that have devices at home, there's a lot of flexibility into the types of devices you can use. So if you already have a desktop or a laptop, on whether it's on a Windows platform or Chromebooks or even the Mac operating system, there's flexibility and the ability to use all of those different types of devices. I think the key thing is just to have a device with a keyboard, have internet connectivity, and you should be able to get plugged into online content and access learning this way.
Thank you, Michael, but don't go anywhere because I've got yet one more question. We're on a run of device questions. A friend of ours on IG who didn't leave their name asked, I was in middle school last year and now I'm going to high school. Do I keep the device that I got for middle school and take it with me, or will they give me another device at high school?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we provided guidance to schools and that was passed on to families as well is students that are remaining in the district, transitioning, even if they're transitioning from one city school to another, should keep their device and take their device, hang on to their device as they go to the new school. So one of the things we don't want to do is have a situation where families have to return a device as students transition from one school to another, and then have to come back in to receive a new device. So just in this time that we're in, trying to keep everyone safe, and just to try to make things easier for families, it is much simpler for students just to hang on to the device. And so that's what we ask. Don't try to return a device if you've already been given one. If you're remaining with the district, then you will continue to use the device you were given in the prior grade, and you'd be able to use that in a new school if you are attending a new city school.
Thank you, Michael. And that's the last one I have now, for now. So if I need anything, I'll come back to you, but thank you for those great answers. Allison, we have a question from Instagram from Moody Moonchild 215. That person asked, how are we ensuring restorative practice continue in a virtual space?
So we have times blocked off in the schedule that is for social and emotional learning, and some of that, the training that we're providing to teachers would be in use of restorative practices in the classroom. I'm pretty sure that Sarah Warren is here, and I think Sarah can speak to this more deeply than I can, but this will be part, we'll really recognize the importance of, especially in this time as a stressful time, really creating space for students' social emotional learning. And Sarah's been doing some great work really leading professional learning for our teachers to prepare them for that work. And the schedule reflects the need to provide those opportunities for students. So I'm going to let Sarah speak a little bit more about how that will be incorporated into the school day.
Great, thank you. I love that question. So we are working to integrate restorative approaches as well as social and emotional learning throughout all that we do. So we will start with school leaders and teachers as we head into the new school year, creating restorative spaces virtually for adults to process what they've been going through and to prepare themselves for entering the school year with students. And so we hope that by creating those healing spaces through a virtual restorative format, that we will help people be more ready for the new year. And then that also gives them the chance to experience and see this process of using restorative circles modeled. And then we will be building in both the restorative circles and social emotional learning activities for students at each grade level. It will both be built into the beginning and end of the school day, as well as integrated into individual class sessions. So the goal is to be using these restorative approaches and social emotional learning approaches throughout each day, as well as setting aside specific times for that.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. I appreciate you. Thanks for being here with us tonight, as always. Allison, we're cooking tonight. We're answering quite a bit of questions on a very diverse set of topics. And speaking of, on Facebook, Candy Hall asked, what accommodations are being made for home and hospital students?
So I know we've got some one-on-one time, the one-on-one aids time built into the schedule as well. Is this, Sarah, is this you or Deb? Who should answer this one?
Yeah, so our home and hospital program will continue on as usual. What we did in the spring, and we've learned from that and will continue on as we enter into the fall, is providing virtual access to our home and hospital teachers for the students that are enrolled in that program. There's some possibility that as we move forward, some of our teachers may be physically working in the hospitals, but the immediate plan is for a virtual connection. So again, we had experience with that in the spring. The teachers got pretty good at it. If you have any particular questions about an individual student and need support, you should feel free to reach out to our home and hospital office, and we can certainly provide more information and address individual needs as well.
Thanks again, Dr. Warren. I appreciate you. Allison, we saw this question on our staff town hall, and we're seeing it again at our family town hall regarding screen time. Is there a flexibility in the amount of time that students will have to spend online in a virtual environment? We've gotten quite a few questions tonight about folks that are concerned about that.
Yeah. So yeah, and it is a concern. And so we, the schedules that we put together really try to consider the age appropriateness of different amounts of screen time. So you'll see that the amount of screen time goes up as students age. So there's less screen time for younger students. Janice, I think, is still here, but on the phone. I think one of the things that we will be looking at as we implement this is, how is this working out for students, and how do we integrate different modes of learning for students to make sure they're getting what they need. So so synchronous learning is one of the key ways, but there are other ways to effectively engage students in virtual learning that will also be incorporated into what we're doing. Some of the professional learning that we're doing before school starts will address that. But yeah, I think every parent has this concern about the appropriate level of screen time. And so how do we provide quality educational options that are really engaging students and moving them, accelerating them through the curriculum, but at the same time in ways that are really making the most of what we know about effective virtual learning. So Janice, are you on the phone? Can you add anything?
I am. I would just add, and thank you, Allison, just that, you know, the other part of that is to follow up what Dr. Warren hit as well, is that the work that we're planning both in the curriculum and in professional development will also take into account the developmental appropriate needs of students. So thinking about things like brain breaks, body breaks, when kids can get up and move around and have conversations that aren't just sitting in front of a screen. And the same with some of the asynchronous learning that you talked about, or learning that students are doing independently. Some will be connected to formats where students will work online, and some will be hands-on kinds of opportunities. So we are really keeping that forefront as we think through what the days look like and how students experience them. We will be continuing to collect feedback as we go along. As Allison shared, that if we need to do adjustments or think about how do we do it in a more strategic way to break that time up, we're really being thoughtful around that. But so far, we've been engaging with a number of teachers who have provided feedback, and then working with the content teams to think about what does that balance look like, and keeping that concern, you know, in everything that we plan. So thank you for raising that.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you, Janice, for answering that question. Now we're going to pivot to YouTube, where we've not answered a question from that platform the entire evening. We have a question from Cynthia Banks. Cynthia asks, will there be some kind of accommodation for parents who work and do not have childcare due to COVID, so their students will be able to participate in virtual learning?
So that's a great question, and it's something that we are aware is a big issue for many of our families and staff too, who are working outside of the home and those working in their home. So we are, you know, working with actually partners, including the Rec and Parks Department, to try to figure out what kind of options we could create for some in-person opportunities for students to access their virtual learning, so they could, you know, during the times in the day when they're engaged in instruction, they could be using their Chromebook at, you know, some of our schools to you know, use the Wi-Fi there to engage in their learning. And then also there would be, you know, if we can work this out, there's still details to be worked out, but there would be times then they could then work with Rec and Parks to do some programming at Rec and Parks during some of those breaks that Janice talked about. So it's still a work in progress, and we hope to be able to announce more later. And it won't be, frankly, enough for all students or all families, but we are very aware that this is a need, and going to try to figure out ways that we can partner with our partners at Rec and Parks, or to try to create some opportunities for families to meet that very genuine need for childcare for their students.
Thank you, Allison, for answering that question. I have yet another one. Well, of course I do. We're in the middle of a town hall. On Facebook from Sarah Elizabeth Wilson. She asked, well, she says, there hasn't been a successful safe opening yet with COVID numbers similar to Baltimore, even with precautions in place. How do we know what safe is supposed to look like?
Yeah, so I really appreciate that question, and it's you know, it's data that we are looking at regularly too. I think again, it is why we're starting in an all virtual environment, to make sure that before we did anything in person, that we would figure out how to do so safely. I think what you've seen in places where it has been successful, it's about doing a gradual move towards opening in smaller groups, small group instruction, maybe students who are struggling, or students who are special ed, trying to figure out those students who would be best served by an in-person experience. But even that can't happen until the environment creates until the environment is right to make sure that we can do that safely. So we did some in-person instruction this summer in some summer school sites, and that was very successful. The students really enjoyed it, really benefited from it. The teachers who participated in it really thought it was beneficial for students and enjoyed it themselves. We put standard operating procedures in place to test that out. Those were very small environments, and again, with strict procedures for maintaining health and safety. And so that's the kind of thing that we are, that was a really positive experience, and we are learning from that and continuing to look at, are there other ways that we could do it safely? But your concern about doing it safely is our concern. We wouldn't do this if we couldn't find a way to do it safely. And so again, we are starting virtually because we aren't sure that we could yet. So we are going to keep monitoring the public health data. And as I mentioned earlier on the call, we have expert advisors in the health field from the City Health Department, from Johns Hopkins, from Morgan State, and from University of Maryland, who are advising us about what standard operating procedures could look like that would protect the safety of our students and families, and then what metrics we should be looking at and making decisions about whether there is opportunities that could be safely offered for in-person learning. So I really appreciate the question, and I really appreciate the fact that we all need to be really vigilant about how, if we're going to do any of these in-person options, that we do it safely.
Great. Thank you, Allison. We're heading into the home stretch. We're within the last few moments of our time together, so let's make a good run and make sure we're giving folks the information they need. And I'm going to transition to a question that we received on Facebook from Janice Hyman. Janice asked, my grandson is transitioning from a charter to a traditional school. Does he have to return his device back to the charter school and then get another device and hotspot from his traditional school?
Wow, that is a tricky one. Boy, you like to give us the stumpers late in the call. Angela's on, so she's going to help me with this one. That one is a little bit tricky. I'm not sure. I mean, what I would want to do, I'm sure, is what everybody would want to do, is to say no, that they could just keep them. But there are challenges because the charter school paid for that out of their grant funds. So I don't know. Angela, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that because of grant funding, that likely you'll have to return the device to the school. I think the best thing to do, I wonder if there's a way I can follow up with you directly. I think there's a way you can problem solve around that to make sure, we're swapping one device for another. You're returning that device, but getting the device from the school that you're returning to. But it is important that we give that back because of the issue we talked about with funding, so that purchase with different funds.
We can help you with that, Angela.
Okay, if you can help me connect to the person, then let's follow up and we can figure out how to make that seamless.
Yeah, so we'll take care of that after the event. But thank you for being here, Angela. We appreciate you. All right, on to the next one. Let's see. Well, Janice Hyman, you just asked the question, so I'll try to circle back, but we got some other folks who have not had their questions answered, such as Key Rose on Facebook, who asked, will you have parent workshops to teach us how to teach our students?
I love that question. That is such a great question. So I think it sounded like Janice was about to jump in. So I'll let you jump in too, Janice. That is a great question, and we definitely will. We realize that this time has not just been hard on staff and students, it's been hard on parents. And myself included. So we definitely recognize the need to figure out how to support parents and how do they support their children in this time. So we're setting up a parent university, some sessions to help parents with that. But Janice, I know you spoke with our family and community engagement team on this very topic today, so you probably have the most up-to-date information on what we're thinking.
Yes, thanks, Allison. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump over you. It's an exciting topic, so I was just ready to go, right?
I'm glad. I'm glad to hear you're so excited, because I am too.
Yes, just wanted to say the same thing, that basically we're planning a two-tier strategy. So we're doing some things that will happen at the district level that, will continue to support folks around how to access the internet, how to make sure they understand the schedule, where their child should be, help and support with building routines. But then we've also started working with our school principals to ensure that schools also have supports built in for families. So, I mentioned earlier the pickup events, but it will also be ways to make sure families know how to log in, know what their passwords are, know what to do when they have trouble to find things. And then also some exciting work coming that we've been working with some tutoring partners to think about how can we spend some time engaging parents in that tutoring so they can also support their students at home with that. So we're really excited. And as you said, working with our family and community engagement office. So that will be more information coming out soon around ways to leverage all of that work.
Thank you, Janice. And we also have our Chief Academic Officer / co-host from time to time, John Davis, who also has some thoughts on this topic. Chief Davis, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you, Andre. I mean, the bottom line to this is if our families are not comfortable on that first day with what their child is going to log on, what they're going to see, what the schedule is, then we're starting off behind. And so schools will be doing what Janice said. They will be creating, virtual and where we can, safe in-person family orientations. I mean, there's going to be parents, whose children are going from, say, 8th to 9th grade. That's a huge transition. Or even 5th to 6th in some of the middle schools, And we have to make sure that we've got some type of family orientation. And our schools have been thinking about this and doing some initial planning. We worked with them in the last couple of days around some family and community engagement strategies. But in the end, we will have family orientation sessions to do exactly what the writer said.
Thank you, Chief Davis. I appreciate you. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us again. Now, Allison, we have another question from Ann McGlow on Facebook. Well, it's not really a question, but it's a comment, but something both you can address as well as Dr. Brooks. Ann would like to have a town hall specifically for special education. We're working on that, Ann. But in the meantime, Dr. Brooks, if someone wants to receive information about special education or to otherwise interact with the program, what can they do?
So thank you for asking that question, because I also wanted to add about the parent workshops. So the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee, as well as the Partners for Success, are actually going to be providing workshops for our parents, also to assist with navigating the virtual platforms, helping to assist with accessibility tools. So we actually just, the Office of Special Education just met with our Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee, which is CCAC, yesterday, and to begin to develop some workshops for our parents. So this is a great segue into the question that you're asking. So if get additional information, we do have our parent response unit where we are taking telephone calls, answering questions. And also, if you just reach out to the Office of Special Education, my email is dbrooks@bcps.k12.md.us. We will respond, and we can also begin to navigate through our CCAC where we can address questions. We will be having a virtual CCAC meeting in September, and we will get those dates out so that we can address any questions or concerns our parents and community has.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks. We're glad that you joined us tonight. And Allison, we're at the end of our time, but we're going to take one more question. So let's make it a really, really good one. Not that there aren't a wealth of good ones, but we want to make it a special one. Here we go. And this goes back to Alicia Sparks on Facebook. She says, some of the curriculum, such as the science curriculum, is designed to be hands-on. How will this experience be replicated via virtual learning?
So I am going to let Janice jump in here too, but I think we have activities that are intended for students to do at home. But Janice, you want to jump in? Maybe we lost Janice.
Or Chief Davis.
I'm here. Can you repeat it one more time, Allison?
Oh, yes. So for the curriculum for things like science usually has a lot of hands-on activities. So how will we account for that in a virtual environment?
Sure. So we are building both materials that can support. So some grade levels will have actual materials to support the hands-on experiments. And then the other places we're investigating and investing in video resources and podcasts and different tools that students can engage virtually in the experiment. We know it's not exactly the same, but it's integrated so that as someone is conducting the experiment, you can engage with it throughout. And so we'll continue to look at that and see how that works for our students, and thinking of the curriculum as an expansive kind of opportunity, so that they'll get some of their direct learning with their teacher, and then they'll have some experiments that could be engaging depending upon the grade level with materials that are available to students, or it could be that they are experimenting or engaging in the experiment virtually.
Thank you, Janice, for joining us. And Allison, it's just me and you at the end again. We've answered a lot of questions tonight. We shared a lot of great information. I guess the final note is we're working on our plan to get it ready for the state. Can you share a little bit about what that means? Because folks are saying, well, I see something online that has the word plan on it. Aren't you guys done yet?
So yeah, we did release and presented to the board last week a lot of the details of our plan and that work. There's a lot of details in there. So if you go online, you will be able to find the presentation we made last night to the board that has I think over 100 slides that gives you information about the academic day, the special ed, about English language learners, about operations, about staffing. So there's a lot of different components about our plan in that document. We also are providing to the state by the end of next week a written plan that goes kind of a few layers deeper in terms of detail. So, there's a lot here, and we really have to get to the details that allow school leaders and teachers to implement it. So the plan that we provide to the state will go a little bit deeper into details, and that will be going to the state at the end of next week. But yeah, we really appreciate the amount of feedback we've gotten on the plan and the input along the way. We engaged teachers, we engaged staff members, we engaged families and community members in just a range of focus groups and town halls like this to get feedback on the plan, and welcome that continued feedback both between now and the end of next week when the plan goes to the state, but also this is going to be a living document. I mean, this work we're going to continue to iterate and look at what we're doing and try to figure out how to make it better and improve it along the way. So your continued engagement and feedback is just really appreciated as we do that. I can't say enough about how grateful I am for all the people who have come out to these town halls and focus groups to let us know what you're thinking and ideas you have and your feedback on what we're communicating. So thank you so much for that.
Well said, Allison. Well said. Before we go for the evening, we have a student town hall on Monday at 5 p.m. on Instagram. Although I don't know how many students we have on here, but if you know a student, encourage them to join us. We want their feedback too. A few weeks ago, we tried to create a space for our students to share their thoughts, and we're finding they need a little bit more room. So again, if you know a student, have them join us for the Youth Next Student Town Hall, which will be chaired by the CEO herself, Sonia Brookins Santelises, on Monday at 5 o'clock on Instagram. We look so forward to seeing you there. Go get your immunizations. Visit our website at www.baltimorecitｙschools.org. And we will see you in this space next week. And I want to thank you again. Allison, you've been awesome as usual. To all the folks who answered questions and those who were ready to answer questions. Again, we could not do this without you. Thanks a lot to the greatest school communications team in Maryland. I'm your Director of Communications, Andre Riley. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Andre. You were great as usual.
Thank you.